nothing but a mistake.
Now number 5.
That is propaganda, y'all. As much as we enjoy Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I mean, I do, a lot. But I also do not kid myself that the show, entertaining as it is not aimed at whitewashing the police, their brutality, their violent history, and the fact that the police force, no matter where in the world they exist, do so to serve political and moneyed interests at the detriment of the people they are meant to serve. Hell, in America, the Supreme Court legit ruled that the police is not constitutionally obligated to protect its citizenry, and they are also allowed to lie to citizens as well. Wondering what on earth I'm talking about and if I just yanked that out of my ass? Well, settle in for the ride as we explore 20 book recommendations for the fuck that police prompts for the Fuckathon Readathon. For those who are curious about what the Fuckathon is about, no, it is not a weekend orgy, it's instead a readathon or a reading challenge that I created about 5 years ago, where every year in the month of July, from July 1st to the 31st, we read books to educate ourselves on certain pertinent issues we are currently facing as a people on a global scale. If you want to participate in this year's Fuckathon, which is starting on July 1st, and want to learn more about this year's prompt, I will leave the link to the 2024 Fuckathon announcement video in the description bar. And also there should be a pop-up on screen that you can click on as well. Without further ado, let's move on to the very first book recommendation on this list, which explores the history of policing as we know it today. Because to truly get a scope of how much damage the police as a structure has done, we need to examine where they are coming from, look at how they've brutalized the bodies of those they are meant to protect and serve, and examine conversations of what alternatives we should focus on instead. So we'll kick things off with the first book on the list, Globalizing British Policing, a collection of a myriad of essays edited and compiled into one volume by Georgina Sinclair. I know y'all are shocked. You probably thought I was going to kick things off with a book on the police in America, in which case I apologize, Americans. The world unfortunately doesn't revolve around you. Although you all do get quite the representation on this list. I mean, there are 20 books after all. However, the reason why I am starting with Globalizing British Policing is simple. I am Nigerian. The very first interaction my people had with the concept of the police as it exists today was gotten from the Britons, and so therefore, to acknowledge that, I had to put this book first. Globalizing British Policing examines how the British policing system merged the concept of the police as it served its civil duties with its semi-military form that was used to keep their colonial projects, for example, Nigeria, in check. And now the merger of these two is a variation and version of the systems of police that the rest of the world exhibits, with variations, of course. And who is surprised, really? The British Empire was quite adept at not sitting their ass in one place and sticking their noses in everyone's pie after all. Globalizing British Policing is split into 4 broad parts. The first part covers the police and its role in colonial rule in South India, the Ceylon police and its development, colonial police in Palestine in the 1930s, and even Canadian policing, and now is based off of the Irish model, and much more. Part 2 covers colonial policing in Hong Kong, Cyprus, British colonial Africa, and in Aden in Yemen. Part 3 takes us to the policing in Northern Ireland, and in Part 4 we examine the exporting of British colonial policing to Iraq and the global policing community it has contributed to. All of this to say that the British Empire is a colonizing piece of shit, which we already knew, and if you want a detailed historical account of just how much travesty they have set up with their colonial policing structures, then maybe consider picking up this book. Or if you're still team, but Noria, I am American, give me some American context and history related books, then consider checking out Policing a Class Society, The Experience of American Cities, 1865 to 1915 by Sidney L. Haring. In this book, Sidney postulates the function that the police have always served historically. This function is threefold. The police exists to protect the interests of the manufacturers, i.e. it has always served capitalism and capitalist interests, which would explain why in periods of protest, strikes and riots, when capitalist interests are challenged or threatened, they break out the big guns and bring out the cops, because that's what historically they've always existed for. Their second function, according to Sidney, wasn't to fight crime, as is the bullshit we've been fed. Instead, It is to control how members of the working class relax and enjoy their time. We can't have capitalist cogs and wheels taking the time off to go off a rocker now, can we? And honestly, this thought process, this heavy policing of how we relax and enjoy ourselves and take time away from work, makes me draw parallels to exactly why the police in Nigeria, for example, have a very annoying habit of showing up to bust loud parties, to confiscate our drinks and to lock us up, or try and get a bribe from you if you're caught with a single spliff. They are the Debbie Downers. They want the system sends in so you don't get too carried away. Because if you aren't working or aren't productive, then you must be about to commit some sort of crime. It's egregious, actually, and makes me curious, is that yours experiences too, or is it just here in my corner of the world? And yes, the third historical function of the police, according to the book, is to maintain the balance between the capitalist overlords and the working class people they need to keep obedient, docile, and subservient to maintain the status quo. Any move outside of that risks the entire house of cards coming down in tatters, which is why the police would never let it happen. If you're someone who has always been fascinated by the resistance of labor and want to know more about why the police always shows up to squash that resistance, then you should consider picking this up. Whilst Policing a Class Society traced the history and background of the policing system to its capitalist origins, the next book on the list, Our Enemies in Blue, Police and Power in America by Christian Williams, traces the evolution of the modern police force in America back to the slave patrols and explores their position not as the protector of the people and the defender of the weak, which is what their propagandist bullshit rhetoric wants you to believe. But I'm pretty sure if you're watching this right now and are rightfully angry about the state of the world, then you know that the police has always existed to protect the powerful and defend the murdering, violent status quo. Our Enemies in Blue traces this violent history as we see policing evolve from watchmen to slave patrols to the KKK to the present-day police force as it exists today. It has always lived to serve its purpose of controlling, repressing, intimidating, and terrorizing those who are without power. Because at its core, the police system is aware that the truly rich, the truly powerful are untouchable, and they exist to make sure that they remain untouchable, and instead focus on the vulnerable members of our society, those of us who are poor and powerless, who are only requesting that our rights be seen, recognized, and protected, and instead we get terrorized for it. Because if our rights do not align with the interests of the rich and powerful in our society, then we're shit out of luck. Our Enemies in Blue is focused on the readers being able to see what the police force really is, what it stands for, and what it was built to support. Oh, and I forgot, Christian Williams' vested interest and the details he's able to gather was most likely inspired by the fact that he's a member of Rose City Cop Watch in Portland, Oregon. Now, from someone on the Cop Watch to an investigative journalist, the next book on the list is Rise of the Warrior Cop, The Militarization of America's Police Forces by Radley Balko. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone has seen images of American cops showing up at protests kitted to the nines like they're paramilitary forces that are going to war. And it's not just their kits and how they look, it is how they act, treating the bodies of their country's citizens like they are enemy forces that must be squashed into submission. And if, like me, you have the question of how on earth is this a police force? How the fuck is this legal? Why on earth are they allowed to get away with this? Since when did police forces show up looking like they're about to exterminate a foreign threat? If, like me, those are the questions that pop into your head, then you should definitely pick up Radley Blake's Rise of the Warrior Cop, where he not only explores the historical origins of the police force and institution as it exists to date, from the Roman Republic, medieval England, all the way to our present day, and how Nixon's war on drugs was the impetus that the modern American police needed to go full military level grade on the country, all in the bid to criminalize people of color, devastate these communities, and put as many of them in jail, with raids that are often aggressively brutal in their executions. Things like forced entries that often have guns drawn and pointed on formerly sleeping members of the public who now find themselves with a militarized police force seeking to secure a bust. And why are they so desperate to secure said bust? The answer is pretty simple: the reward. Through his investigations, Radley reveals that the government pays the local police department for each bust, and every department gets a cut from the sale of any property that the police force confiscates during these raids, which means double the earnings that the force makes from these brutal forced entries. So why would the cops actually go out of their way to hunt down any other criminals when drug dealers is where the money is at? And when you consider that a large percentage of these discovered drugs are often simply marijuana, then you understand why these rates keep increasing. It's a low risk, high rewards from them. And often the rewards go into even more weaponry, and with the politicians backing and encouraging the police, it just keeps getting more and more tyrannical and militant, an absolute mess. But if you need a break from the severity of academic texts like the first 4 books I just mentioned, then maybe consider the thriller that is the 5th book on the list, and that is Abuse of Power by Nancy Taylor Rosenberg. Now, I will start by saying, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, child assault, trigger warning. This book is most likely not for everyone. Our lead character, Rachel Simmons, was kidnapped and assaulted as a child, and there are mentions of it and brief flashes or memories of it too, described on the page. She's also drugged and sexually assaulted and in turn blackmailed in the course of the story as well. If such content triggers you, that is fine. This video has timestamps, so you can just jump over to the next recommended book on the list. But back to Abuse of Power. Rachel Simmons is a 34-year-old widow with 2 kids who joins the police department of a small California city with the hopes that she would be better positioned to serve her community, whilst also helping to solve her economic woes. I know you're probably wondering why on earth I put a story featuring a member of the police force in a Fuck That Police video. Some of you are probably wondering if I'm taking the Fuck That Police literally and recommending y'all a romance. No, I am not. Like I said earlier, this is a thriller. Rachel joins the force with good intention, sure, but then when she admits to the truth and basically becomes a whistleblower on the extreme force used by one of her fellow officers on a raid, she becomes blacklisted by the others who believe she should have kept to the code and kept silent. What then follows is a gradual escalation of the abuse meted out on Rachel for daring to attempt to be a good person in a system where systemic abuse is rife and the members of the police force protect their own. It is a sad, depressing book that, although fictional, definitely speaks to the years of experience that the writer, Nancy Taylor Rosenberg, had when she served with the Dallas Police Department, the New Mexico Police Department, and in Ventura, where she also served as a probationary officer. There's an honesty to the storytelling that would leave you appalled at the grimy underbelly of the police force. Sure, it is fiction, but it is fiction that is quite true to life. If, however, you don't want something fictional and instead want a non-fiction viewpoint of the atrocities and the brutalities that the police is more than capable of executing, then you should consider checking out America on Fire, the untold history of police violence and black rebellion since the 1960s by Elizabeth Hinton, where she explores the urban riot, a racist trope and dog whistle that is pushed as a means to delegitimize what it truly is, an oppressed people tired of the structural racism perpetuated by the system, who then rebel as one is wont to do in situations like this, especially when it is in response to political violence and poverty, which was further escalated by President Lyndon Johnson's war on crime. A brief tie back to the militarization of the police force in America. But let's consider it. If every single person at the highest point of power in a country continually declares wars against systemic issues like drugs and crime, and then after doing so arms the police to attack these issues like they are truly at war, why wouldn't they get militarized? What these books basically make clear to us is that when the rot is at the top and seeks to serve certain interests, the police would always be deployed to solve these issues in the most brutal way possible, and the people would often react in the only way they can, with rebellions that span them throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails at the cops, vandalizing institutions and establishments that they found exploitative, and plundering local businesses. This has been the case from 1967 in Detroit to the 1980 riot in Miami and the 1992 one in Los Angeles. And Elizabeth Hinton details it all, helping us see that the people would always have an equal and justified reaction to police violence, which in turn leads to further criminalization of the people instead of solving the systemic issues that kicked off the reaction in the first place. And on it goes. Systems need to be overhauled. The police cannot be the only solution, and luckily we do have writers reimagining what a future without the police could possibly look like. But we will get to that in the latter recommendations in this video. Speaking of riots and the brutal police response that is often employed to squash them and the further damage this in turn causes the community, the next book on the list is I Rise by Mary Arnold, where we follow Ayomide, a 14-year-old living in Harlem, raised by her activist freedom-fighting mother who is quite vocal in the community about police brutality and racial profiling. Activism is all she's ever known, and Ayo is tired of that. She would like to give activism a break and just focus on being a teenager. She wants to get her first kiss, she wants to date, maybe possibly get herself a boyfriend. She just wants a normal teenage life and a normal teenage experience. But that is apparently asking for too much, as when a riot breaks out between protesters protesting police brutality and the members of the Harlem police force, Ayo's mother is shot, putting her in a coma. And now at just 14, whilst dealing with the grief and processing the terrifying possibility that her mother might never awaken, Ayomide is being forced to take on a mantle that she isn't really ready for, and prior to the shooting wanted out of, with members of the community wanting her to be the face of See Us, the initiative her mother had started to help combat the systemic racism and brutality that members of their community face daily. Ayomide has to step into the realization that she has the power to change the future and be the voice of her people. It's about resistance, about finding the support and motivation to keep resisting, even in the face of oppression. It's about surviving earth-shattering tragedies. It is heartfelt, it is powerful, it is inspiring. Now, I think the next logical book to consider, after one has looked at the role the police plays in the brutal squashing of what they deem riots, is to examine the social order that they are so desperate to maintain, which is what the next book on the list explores. I am of course referring to A Critical Theory of Police Power, The Fabrication of the Social Order by Mark Nucleus. Yes, we are back to dense non-fiction recommendations, but that is because in addition to empathizing with fictional characters, I do also think that non-fiction is important reading when we are truly trying to understand the institution of the police and why they exist as they do and what role they serve in our society. And although Mark Nucleus's study is only limited to the police force in America and Europe, it does give us enough of a context to learn and have these conversations about the power structures that govern the police. It follows the same train of thought that Sidney L. Aaron had postulated in one of my earlier recommendations, Policing a Class Society, which is that the police exist to maintain the connecting bonds of order that hold our economy, our society, and the politics of our society together. They, and by they I am referring to the police of course, exist to maintain and keep that balance. That is their one mandate and is the only thing that they would do as an institution. Keyword here being institution, because I'm pretty sure there are people about to tell me that they are good cops and not all cops are bastards. But when the very institution they exist to serve and protect is always going to be at the detriment of the people just so that social order can be maintained. And let's be real, what is order? Who defines it? A peaceful student protest, for example, can be flagged and portrayed as being disorderly and disruptive of the social order, which in turn then brings the police as the avenging force to restore order with any amount of force that they deem necessary, and they always deem extreme force as necessary. So when the very institution that they are part of seeks to always take the route of violence to maintain social order, then I will always stand on ACAB. All cops are bloody bastards. But seriously, back to the statement that those who support the police and how they operate always bring up, oh, it's just a couple of bad apples. The rest of the force are good, honest folk working to protect the people, which I call bullshit. Like, if you're living in the United States, your Supreme Court ruled that they aren't meant to do such thing. Look it up yourself in any search engine. But also, that saying legit says a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch, because rot like that, systemic rot like that, spreads and corrupts and pushes out anyone who doesn't fall in line, as observed in Nancy Taylor Rosenberg's An Abuse of Power, which I mentioned like 5 books ago. The statement is in itself ironic, because when you say it's only a few bad apples, you are reinforcing our argument that the system is rotten at its core and highly contagious, and that is what is explored in the 9th recommendation on the list. What do you serve? Who do you protect? Police Violence and Resistance in the United States. Edited by Maya Shenwa, Joe Macari, and Alana Yulan Price, which is a collection of essays by activists, journalists, community organizers, and survivors of state violence that aims to confront police violence, taking us beyond the "a few bad apples" argument that calls on us to critically examine and interrogate what role and purpose the police serves and how they are built to police our society, as contained in the title of the collection itself. It calls for a true transformational change, one that would see the world free of policing and how it exists today, instead of the surface level reform that the force keeps touting, but that never comes with any true change, because at its core, what needs to change is what they exist for. And from the books I've already mentioned, they've never existed for the people. Because if the police within a community, especially communities of color, cannot be trusted to actually make these communities safer, and instead actively brutalize those communities on a regular, then why do they exist? Why should they be allowed to remain? If the community's fears can be assuaged and solved by other means and methods, then why can't we explore those options instead? It really is an illuminating book from a varied number of writers and contributors if you're interested in picking it up. Of course, I won't talk about police brutality and fuck the police without mentioning one of the YA books that pops into people's minds when we address the topic. And no, I am not talking about The Hate You Give, but instead All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley, a YA novel with alternating chapters that details the experiences of two teens, one black and one white, both caught in the middle of escalating tensions within their town that is also divided along racial lines after an occurrence of devastating police brutality sweeps across their town. Rashad, our black character, is very conspicuously absent from school. Why? Because he's currently at the hospital recovering from broken ribs, a broken nose, and internal bleeding to boot, after he was pounded into a pavement by a white police officer. What did he do wrong? Nothing. He was at a bodega, was startled by another customer, his bag of chips drops, Rashad bends to pick it up, and the cop proceeds to beat him within an inch of his life because he suspects him to be a thief. Like I stated in the previous book recommendation, there is a need to examine who truly the police serves within the community that they reside or patrol in. Because it certainly isn't a young black boy like Rashad. His beating, however, is captured on camera by Quinn, who is unsure of what to feel. Because the cop that was beating his classmate was his best friend's older brother, the man who basically adopted Quinn after his own father was killed in Afghanistan. And he's torn between loyalty to the child-beating cop and the classmate who did not deserve any of that. And although Quinn chooses to be silent, the video footage speaks for itself, and now he has to battle what he thought he knew, unlearn the bias, and come to terms with the racial profiling that was behind the act of police brutality that his pseudo-parental figure meted out on Rashad. If you haven't read All American Boys yet, you should endeavor to change that quickly. Now, part of the reason why I'm so anti-police and say fuck the police a lot is because of how it seems like people, victims of police brutality, and their families never remotely get any sort of justice or restitution at all. It instead seems like the police has been gifted with this immense power that makes them not answerable to anyone. And after spending over 2 decades of research into the matter and advocacy, University of California law professor Joanna Schwartz gives us Shielded, How the Police Became Untouchable, where she explores how the very legal system itself seems built to protect the police. From decisions given by the Supreme Court to the state and local governments and policymakers, all of them geared towards making the police force practically untouchable, which, if we look back to what the books I've mentioned on this recommendation list so far have explored, you understand why they are making all that effort, why the legal system itself seems to protect the police at all costs by giving them things like qualified immunity and no-knock warrants. It's because these entities value the role of the police as a maintainer of social order and their use of force to keep the people docile and in line. It is a book that is necessary if you truly want to understand why the rot in the police system has been allowed to fester. It's because those in power need them to and are willing to go to any lengths to protect them. It's what has happened in the US, what has happened in the UK, what is happening in Nigeria at the present moment. We are fed a lie that the police will be held accountable to the people for wrongdoings committed, and a whole lot of them get away with barely a slap on the wrist because they are shielded. How can the people get justice when even the justice system itself has failed us? Now, police brutality is something that a lot of us have seen or experienced or heard about, and sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have with kids. But that is where graphic novels like Rest in Peace, RaShawn by Ronnie Nelson Sidney, illustrated by Tracy Van Wagner, and designed by Kurt Keller comes in. They help to break down these conversations and distill it in a way to help parents or guardians with young kids address police brutality through the character RaShawn, who is a victim of a police shooting whilst he's playing with a toy gun. This book examines the devastation this death causes his family and community, and is a way to address the worries and questions of children about the police system that is meant to protect them and instead is murdering children of color, particularly black kids, at an alarming rate. It's relevant, it's age appropriate, it's quite a fantastic kids book if that is more your jam, or like I said, you want to have this conversation with the kids in your life. Now, I know I've been focusing a lot on the atrocities of the United States Police Force, so the British police might think that it has scaled through, but nope. Next on the list is Undercover, the true story of Britain's secret police, a book that covers 40 years of state espionage that was uncovered by Rob Evans and Paul Lewis. Now, Yoruba people in Nigeria have a very popular saying that goes, "Afẹ́fẹ́ adeti ri di adìyẹ," meaning the great wind has blown and now we can see the yash, the buttocks, the bum of the chicken. aka secrets have been revealed, showing the slimy, stinking core of the person who has been unveiled. In this case, it is the British police who these two investigative journalists found out that for 40 years, 40 bloody years, have been infiltrating political activist groups in the United Kingdom. They stole the identities of deceased persons, often kids, and created fake identities, fake passports, fake licenses, and bank accounts. Say Her Name by Zeta Elliott and illustrated by Love Is Wise. Say Her Name, just as you might have guessed, was inspired by the hashtag Say Her Name movement, and so therefore this poetry collection of 49 poems, 4 of which are tribute poems, explore a range of topics from self-care and self-love to police brutality to black resistance. It is a tribute piece to victims of police brutality and the activists who are fighting for black lives to matter, particularly the lives of black women and girls. It's rhythmic, it's powerful, it's empowering, and coupled with the illustrations, it's a collection that will soothe your soul and lift your spirit, especially if you're a black woman or femme who also happens to be queer. Highly recommend, but not if you are one of those poetry snobs who think that poetry must look or be written a certain way to be real poetry. You know yourself. If that's the case, then maybe look to other books I've mentioned. Now, I've made a lot of talk highlighting the history of the police, the brutality they have become famed for, the gross injustices that occur on their watch, and the lack of accountability that most countries have with regards to the police force. And as promised earlier in this video, the following 6 books are aimed at examining what we can do then, what options are available to us, and what alternatives we can pursue, starting with Defund the Police, an international insurrection by Chris Kunin, which calls on readers and society as a whole to turn to more community-focused models of support instead of relying on the fallacy of the police force and the protection it's meant to give us. Defund the Police gives readers a comprehensive overview of what true alternatives to the policing we all know and subconsciously try to recreate could possibly look like. Chris Kunin, who is a professor of criminology at the John Bonner Institute for Indigenous Education and Research at the University of Technology, Sydney, spent decades researching and exposing the police system in Australia and the racism inherent in the system, and brings that knowledge to bear whilst also highlighting and exposing the global police system for the elite-serving failure that it is. It pushes instead for practical alternatives, calling us to collectively become abolitionists, who instead will put the safety of the community first. Law enforcement as it exists today and all around us keeps failing communities at a very alarming rate. Something needs to give. Something needs to change. And for that to happen, we have to collectively agree to becoming abolitionists. which is the title of Dereka Purnell's memoir, Becoming Abolitionist, Police Protest and the Pursuit of Freedom, in which she takes us on a journey of how she went from a young woman living in St. Louis, often unhoused and experiencing food insecurity, who saw way too much sexual violence and buried way too many of her friends, and thus was certain that the police force needed to stay, that they were essential for checking crime and protecting those around her, and thus could not even imagine a city or country without them. A memoir follows her journey of going from that person with absolute trust in the police to witnessing the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the murder of first Trayvon Martin, then Michael Brown, which then had her realizing that the police was a placebo effect. They never really solve the root of the problem. They never really reduce or eliminate the harm at the root that breeds the violence in the first place. In her memoir, she calls on readers to reimagine, to envision creating systems, new ones that work to address the root causes of violence, because at its core, abolition is not just about ridding ourselves of the police. That would merely just create a vacuum and would be in the same place we've always been. Instead, to be an abolitionist is to be committed to creating and supporting answers, a variety of them, aimed at getting to the root causes of the harm in our society so we can solve them once and for all. And with her book, she draws on lessons that activists in Ferguson, in South Africa, have learned in their dealing with the police. Abolition is hard work, but it's a good place to start the questioning process, because truly the alternative is staying where we currently are with no change in sight, just a repeat of similar patterns and a prayer and a hope that it eventually gets resolved. Not really something you think of when you think police brutality, is it? Still speaking on abolition, the next book on the list is No More Police, a call for abolition by famed abolitionist advocate and activist Mariam Kaba, and attorney and organizer Andrea J. Ritchie. It's a book born out of a collective voice demanding that government defund the police and instead put the money back into the communities who have otherwise been devastated by police brutality, ravaged by poverty, and dealing with an absence of resources that would otherwise help to solve some of the root cause of the problems being faced within the communities. The writers highlight that it is a pretty viable plan, especially considering that there is research and actual data that backs that there is no correlation between crime rates and the budget of the city's police force, i.e., there is no rise in crime when the police force loses money, and there is no drop in crime rates when the police are given money. Instead, funding the police to such a degree just gives them more of the tools to further brutalize the community. So why not instead just invest the funding into the communities? The book postulates that community support and community building is a great way to tackle crime rates and violence within the community. It is what we've always done as a people. It's how our ancestors governed themselves before, for example, colonial powers like the fucking British colonial police showed up and implemented the structure of the police that we know today on our colonized lands. We can get better if we are allowed to envision better and given the community resources to implement better. This is a concept that the next book on our list pushes even further. I'm referring to A World Without Police, How Strong Communities Make Cops Obsolete by Gio Meha, where we have further offered strategies that might serve us in building even stronger communities that would not need the police the way we are used to them today. Gio Meha gives us suggestions such as neighborhood response networks, community-based restorative justice practices, community-organized self-defense projects, and properly funded social services that would serve the communities. It is a book that establishes and forces us to see the power we hold as a community and how indeed we do have the means to enforce systems that benefit our people, keep ourselves safe and accountable, step in to help those of our communities who do need that help and support, nip whatever problem that arises in the bud without bringing in the heavily militarized presence of the police, who more often than not just make things so much worse. And then there is Beyond Survival, Strategies and Stories from the Transformative Justice Movement, a collection of essays and interviews that were edited by dear Lakshmi Pibsna, Samara Sinha, and Ejeris Dixon, where just as the previous books have highlighted, there is a call to explore alternatives to calling the police and instead focus on communities and how they handle, protect, and look out for their own. Transformative justice is a series of processes that have been in existence for a while and are well known to work within marginalized communities where they have been used. Trans, queer, indigenous, black communities are aware of the dangers that sometimes follows calling the cops. The news and stories are littered with people who saw their loved ones shot and sometimes killed by the police because of a misplaced 911 call. Beyond Survival seeks instead for us to build community safety systems that can exist and function outside of the criminal justice system and police. There are essays and accounts with suggested approaches to be used in situations to help prevent violence and abuse, all without the police force being called. These are people's actual real-life experiences being put together as a reference point. Communities are made up of people like you and I. We collectively decide how it is governed, the processes that guide us, how we would see those processes maintained and enforced, and how we navigate the situations as they arrive. Transformative justice is not infallible. It is being worked on and improved upon every single day, and with each addition it becomes an even more stronger alternative to the police system as it exists today. And finally, we have Can We Please Give the Police Department to the Grandmothers by Juanita Patriot and illustrated by Christian Uroda, which is an illustrated children's book that is based off of the poem by Coretta Scott King. It is a joyful, radical book for kids to help them imagine a world where they can navigate their communities without fear, without cops and the brutality that they seem so quick to met out on kids, especially kids of color, especially black kids. It is a beautiful book that instead imagines a future filled with the love and warmth of their community, where grandmothers are the ones responding to community events and transgressions, and they would step in with love and warmth, not the punitive actions that the police would use instead. And honestly, I do think that this reimagining of a society where community is at the heart of what we do, how we act, and how we hold one another accountable is a beautiful way to end this video, which has been a long one. I apologize again. But hopefully you found a couple of new books to add to your TBR for future study. I hope you enjoy reading them. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it. This took a whole long ass time to put together, and liking, subscribing, and sharing the video is a great way to support me and my channel. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my patrons. You all keep me going and help keep my lights on. Thank you. If you want to consider supporting me on Patreon, the link is in the description bar. If you are interested in participating in the Fuckathon Readathon and might be interested in Fuckathon merch, which I'm sorry, it just occurred to me that since I made the merch in 2021, I really haven't talked much about it. But yeah, there is Fuckathon merch available on my Spring account. I will leave the link to that in the description bar, and it should pop up in the shop link on screen if I can figure out how to do so. But yeah, that is 20 book recommendations very suited to the fuck the police prompt. Next week's video is for fuck billionaires. That is going to be interesting. So if you're interested in that, do come back to the channel. I make new videos 3 times a week. Anime manga content on Mondays, movie TV shows content on Wednesdays, currently on a Bridgerton kick, FYI, and I make bookish content on Fridays. New videos all come out at 5 p.m. EST, so I will see you then. Until next time, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.